This video is brought to you by the Star Wars Card Trader app. It's free to download and includes hundreds of Star Wars characters, vehicles, locations, and more. With the ability to trade with Star Wars fans around the world and the option to open new packs every day for free. Bloody give it a go if you want. Or don't, I don't know. Regardless, it's linked below and encompasses everything from the prequel trilogy right up to The Force Awakens. With no doubt some Rogue One stuff right around the corner. Maybe we'll see this guy. What's his name? I don't know. Yeah, pretty good. Okay, on with the video. Hello everyone. Today we see the return of a This is bullshit. I'll just leave all this in. I'll just leave it unedited.
This is bullshit.
Today we see the return of a guest that everybody seemed to really enjoy last time when we had him on a few months back. And again, he's here to talk all things Star Wars, the movies, the comics, the books, the TV series, and whatever else happens to come up. You probably know him as one half of the Schmoes, or over at Collider Video, where he headlines the excellent Star Wars show Jedi Council, among others. Kristian Harloff, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me back. I'm excited to talk about the new stuff. There's been a lot to talk about since the last time we chatted.
You were absolutely not wrong, but I thought a good way to start might be to go, what are your general thoughts on the new canon? I mean, you cover this literally every week, so you're all over it. You've read most things, if not all things. Is that right? You've seen all the all the Rebels and all that.
I'm caught up on most of the new canon. The only stuff that I am not as caught up on are like the short stories. Right. I miss like on the Star Wars Insider stuff, or if there's maybe I think like the most of the young reader stuff I have, but there's a couple things that I'm not caught up on. But for the most part, I'd say 90%.
So do you think, overall, wiping away the old canon and it being replaced with the new stuff, has it been worth it in terms of the stories that we've been getting, like the quality?
I do. I think so. And I understood, I don't understand stupid billboards when people are going, we need the old legends back. It just, if you have all those stories back, if you have those back, Chewie's dead. He was crushed by a moon. We don't want
That's right. No.
So, I mean, I know some people just want to have it to where the other argument is, no, that's not what we're saying. All we're saying is we want those stories to still be out there, and you can still buy them. They're still legend stuff. But the problem is you'll start confusing the fans if you say, well, this one is canon, this one isn't. So they ultimately had to reboot it to tell this brand new story. And I do like where they're going because it's still so young. And I just finished Life Debt. And you can tell the stuff that they're telling, the stories, the story group has such a lock on what's happening post-Jedi, early post-Jedi, then you go into Bloodline, and then it's leading up to the years of The Force Awakens, and you go back into some of the younger comics, and it's the in-between between episode 4 and 5. There's so much story to tell, and they're very clear of it. They have a very clear idea of where they're going with it. So I do like very much what they've been doing so far with the new canon.
Absolutely. And that's not to say that there aren't a whole lot of fantastic stories that are in the old canon, and not that there isn't in the new one as well. But like you said, those stories do exist. You can still go out, and grab those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They didn't go around to everybody's house and like burn down your bookshelf. You know what I mean?
Right.
And of course, it's a necessity. How can you launch the new movies with all these other books that you'd have to kind of tiptoe around? I mean, they contradicted themselves as it was. Like, do you know what I mean? Like from book to book.
It was too confusing because nobody was really regulating it back then because they didn't really need to.
No, that's exactly right.
And they have to regulate it now because everything needs to kind of pass through the story group. The story group needs to say, okay, well, you can use that, you can't use that. I mean, look at what's happening with Saagar Era. That was something when you hear Pablo Hidalgo talk about it, how that all came about when they were coming up with the story for Rogue One. Like, well, we needed this type of character, and Pablo's like, well, we actually have that type of character, and they gave them Saagar Era, and it fits in beautifully with the Clone Wars and with the mention in Rebels, and and now we get a canon character that you're starting to see more of it, and I think you're going to see even more of that. Like someone I want to see is Ray Sloan. I think Ray Sloan, it will be an absolute, I mean, especially after reading Life Debt. This is a very flushed out, complex character that I think needs to appear in a movie eventually.
I think the way that they've been doing it as well is smart. When you look at characters like Saagar Era, you can know who he is, and that kind of enriches the story. But if you don't, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no,
they're
not at
bringing
all.
in characters that that are important but aren't necessarily you don't need to know absolutely everything.
Yeah, that's the trick. I mean, that's what they said in Entertainment Weekly before they announced who Forrest Whitaker was. They said that the Star Wars purist and the completist would know. And the thing is, when you're reading these books, you shouldn't. Because it's a dangerous thing for Star Wars or Lucasfilm and Disney to say, well, you have to be caught up on all the books or you're going to be lost. Then you're going to take fans that are like, I don't want to, like Mark Ellis, I don't want to read. It's like, so you have to get, it's almost like rewarding people who do read the books, but yet not confusing or making people feel like they're not some part of some club if they aren't caught up on reading or watching Rebels or something.
Well, speaking of, all this kind of extra stuff, kicking it off with comics, is there any in particular that for you have really kind of stood out? I know you enjoyed the C-3PO. How did he get his red arm comic? That was one of your favorites.
You stopped that right now. That was one of the worst. I would say actually the one that just came out was the Han Solo one.
Absolutely.
What a great issue that was. I'm waiting for the next one. The Vader one it started good, and then it went on this kind of decline for a little bit, but then once it had the run with the Vader down issues, I really enjoyed that. I think some of the Star Wars comics, the Star Wars led by name were really good. But I'll tell you, the canon comic was one I still think stands out. That was one that I really enjoyed.
That one's kind of surprising, and I found the same thing with the ObiWan and Anakin story, where when they announced it, I'm like, oh, do we really need to see this? Like, aren't we done with all that kind of prequel stuff? Can we move forward? But there's a lot of insight in that story, and the same with Kanan that I didn't expect to get, or I didn't expect to actually care. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and I like that and that's, going back to your question before with how they pay attention to the canon stuff. Like I mentioned, Ray Sloan, she showed up in the Kanan comic, and she was also in New Dawn, made her first appearance in New Dawn. So and they actually, in one of the issues, I can't remember which one, but they actually tied it into it was the episode of Rebels when they confront that Mandalorian general, and they talk about how Kanan and him had met in the past, and then in the next Kanan issue, they actually showed that event. So
that's right. They timed that really well. Yeah,
timed it really well, and obviously because Weissman was a producer on the first season of Rebels, so he was one of those guys that really helped develop Kanan. Very aware of his backstory, so it was really a well flushed out story. I was bummed when they announced the ending of that comic.
Yeah, do you think it's something we might see return, or do you think it's kind of one and done?
Yeah, I think they kind of hit their mark with that one. I think they're kind of trying to do other things. I think the ones like Vader and Lando was really good, by the way.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, Lando really surprised me. Yeah.
Well, because they didn't just make it. They could have just made it about how Lando was, trying to score tail and win hands of Sabak the whole time. But
I would have read that. That's fine with me. But
but eventually it would have worn out. You're not wrong, but when they added that Sith artifact stuff with Palpatine and Palpatine's ship, that was like no one saw that coming. And the way that they did that, it was really smart. I could have done without the cat people, but other than that. I really dug that comic.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the way that he is this regular guy or this smuggler, and he's in way over his head. Like he's in a situation that he should definitely not be in. And even the Lobot stuff was really great.
Oh, the Lobot stuff was really good. And I think, they played it like this kind of like buddy cop thing that the two of them had. And how he was injured. And I wonder if that kind of was the reasoning down the line of why he doesn't speak as much as he does. It was really cool the way they played into it.
Yeah, absolutely. You read Shattered Empire, I assume?
I did. I like Shattered Empire. I think that some of the events of Shadows of the Empire is going to be Shattered Empire. Excuse me. Shattered Empire is gonna play into some stuff in episode 8.
Do you think the tree?
Yeah.
Specifically? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think the tree is going to play in, and it actually reminded me, one of the ones that I'm not enjoying as much is the Poe comic.
Oh right, yeah. No, that's not. It's not great, is it? It's okay.
It's okay. There's some things they represent Poe pretty well. But yeah, I think that Shattered Empire was. You know what Shattered Empire was? It was what we hoped Aftermath was going to be.
Right, yep.
When they announced that Aftermath was coming out, was going to be the first post-Jedi story that we got to see. Everybody was like, "Oh man, I can't wait to see what happens."
It's going to be this Timothy Zahn-esque kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like, where's it gonna go? And it didn't do that, but Shattered Empire did, and there were some cool things that they had done with Shattered Empire that really started to paint the picture of what post Jedi Star Wars universe was like.
And that was what was so exciting for me reading that comic. A lot of the comics were set kind of before or around the original trilogy, but this was like, no, this happens directly after Return of the Jedi, and we hadn't really seen that yet. So that was really good. Were there any that like have really kind of not stood up so well?
The comics, I think that the one you mentioned, the C-3PO one, was worthless. But
I mean, at least it was one. So.
It was one, and I'll tell you someone that they've done justice to since this comic, but the comic was scaring me, was the Leia comic. I really didn't like the Leia comic at all.
Yeah, I was surprised how much I didn't enjoy that one. Yeah, that's done now, isn't it? Like that. I don't think that's that particular story arc anyway.
That arc is done. The artwork I didn't like, but I'll tell you what, there were a couple story beats that I did like. And, again, going back into our conversation from before, they actually tie in a character from the Leia comics into Life Debt. Chuck Wendig actually,
right.
and it works, and it works well. So I didn't like the overall arc, but I did like some elements of it. But I would say that and the C-3PO comic are probably my two least favorite.
I found the Leia stuff in Shattered Empire much more interesting. Doesn't she go? Is that the one she goes back to Naboo? And she like senses Darth Maul in the hangar. Is that one?
That's in the Leia comic, and
that's in the Leia comic.
That's in the Leia comic. Like that was one, and the other thing that I thought was a cool element from the Leia comic was when she goes back to Naboo, and she actually pictures her mother and sees her mother sad, because that kind of throws back into that Jedi moment. Yes. So where Luke says, "What do you remember?" She remembers her mother, but she remembers her being sad, and it's like, okay, that's, if you're gonna play a little catch up here on a little retcon, I can take it. I can dig it.
Absolutely. Now, this is an area that I'm not as familiar with, but best Star Wars books, because in Australia, a lot of them aren't available. Sorry, the ebooks are, but the audiobooks aren't for some reason. And it's driving me fucking crazy. Like, I can't. So this is really your area. Do you have any books that have really stood out for you?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm actually, I would call myself now a Star Wars new canon novel junkie. When they send them to me, I just finished Life Debt in 2.5 days. I read it that fast, and I did not like Aftermath. I like it. It's in my like kind of least favorites. But I really liked Life Debt. I would put it in my top 5. And because I'm not Chuck Wendig for me when I read Aftermath, the first one, I'm not a big fan of I wasn't the fan of his writing style for that book. I always said that I always felt like it was someone trying to write Star Wars as opposed to just the characters popping to life. And going back to what we just said with the post Jedi, I was hoping for all that information of what the universe was like, and I guess he was a little handcuffed because he really couldn't say anything yet because The Force Awakens hadn't come out. But I got nothing out of that book, and in Life Debt, I got a lot of that. You find the fractions of the Empire that are trying to survive. Ray Sloan is being advised by this mysterious figure. I don't want to give any spoilers, and you find out kind of who that person is and what the plan is. The crew that we actually met in Aftermath is helping find Han Solo, and the last he was seen was trying to liberate Kashyyyk. There's Mon Mothma has a pretty big part. There's a lot of elements that just takes all the characters together that we like and tells a really cool story. Now, there are certainly some things about it I didn't like, but overall I really enjoyed that one, so I put it in my top 5, maybe at the 5 spot. But I would say that the one I liked the most 100% is Lost Stars by Claudia Gray.
Right. Yeah, no, you've been a big proponent of that from the very start. You were pushing that book when Shattered Empire came out. Not Shattered Empire, sorry.
It's Aftermath. Yeah.
Aftermath, sorry, yeah. Yeah, you were really pushing that book. Like every week you'd be like, everybody, you got to get on this. Like if you were disappointed, by the other one, this is kind of where it's at, and
yeah, because they were pushing Aftermath so much. Is the first the big book that everyone, it was the Entertainment Weekly did a big spread on it, and everyone was talking about how Aftermath was the next big thing, and they didn't do any promotion for Lost Stars. And I was and it wasn't even a Del Rey book; it was a Lucasfilm publishing book, and I was walking through. Where were they, Target or something, and I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, I remember hearing about this thing. I can't imagine it's any good, and I just tore through it, it was amazing. And I said, this is what a Star Wars writer should be doing. This is the story that she should be telling, and it just chronicles all the way from the original trilogy up until right before the events of, I mean, not right before the events, but it's after Jedi, and it's kind of the battle at Jakku and all these things. So it was really interesting, and I liked what Claudia Gray did.
And you enjoyed Bloodline as well. Is that another one of hers? Is that right?
I loved Bloodline. I think Bloodline would be my number 3 or 4. And it doesn't hurt when Claudia Gray puts a planet in after you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Congratulations. That's forever. Like that's locked in.
Dude, when because I had joked about it because I was talking about Lost Stars with her, you know, like you said, I just made sure that I promoted it as much as I could because I wanted the fans to have like a fun Star Wars story to be able to read. And then she had asked me kind of jokingly, oh, if there's anything ever anything I could do, and I said, yeah, name a character after me in the next canon book. And I was kidding, you know, half kidding.
Yeah.
And then I'm reading on my couch like midnight. And then I see that there's a planet named, I'm like, holy crap. And I just I couldn't believe it. I kind of jumped up. I was considering waking up my wife, but I didn't think it was worth the headache.
And was this like before it had come out officially?
It was before it came out officially. Yeah, it was.
So it's not even, or did you or did you go on Twitter and then just tell everybody?
Yeah, I was able
it's
to.
It's not a massive spoiler, is it?
No, I was able to say, it didn't spoil anything. So I was able to say that. So, but that, you know, regardless of that, I think that she put together, this was like the first book that you get. This takes place 6 years before The Force Awakens, and you start to get into the politics of what has happened in the galaxy leading up to The Force Awakens and where Leia is exactly, and then learning that Rian Johnson had a lot to say about the book and lending his take of the events that is happening to Episode 8. It's a pretty relevant book, and it's something that fans that want to be caught up on all the inner workings should be leading into Episode 8.
Yeah, because that's something they obviously avoided for Episode 7, all the politics and what the factions are and how they're aligned. And it sounds like that book, fills in all those.
It does, and I'll tell you what. So does Life Debt. Life Debt starts to paint the picture of why the Empire was on the run, who was running the Empire at the time, like how the New Republic was starting to take over certain planets, what the politics were like how the Empire ceased to be, how like the certain fights that they were starting, like who was still running it, like how some people on some, like they were in these shattered factions, the Empire, and that the Empire in some planets there were certain factions of the Empire that were saying no, they're putting up the illusion that Palpatine's still alive, and then there are other factions that are saying no, he's dead, and they were in such disarray, and you start to understand more. It's really fascinating. And then the other one that I love, that I think that I've been championing for a while, was Paul Kemp's Lords of the Sith.
Right. Yep. Now that's set just before the.
No, it's 5 years. It's 5 years after Revenge of the Sith.
Okay. Right. Cool.
Yeah.
And then that's still a Vader kind of up and coming and kind of sorting out what's going on in his head. Is that the idea?
Yeah, he's learning a lot about this new persona and how to deal with it, because he's still kind of there's still a little bit of Anakin that's kind of fighting inside of him with thought. He's kind of pushing it down, and he and the Emperor actually get caught on Ryloth and have to fight their way out of it. And you just see the way that Palpatine is really in his head, and how he just helps him further down into the dark side. It's pretty phenomenal.
Whose perspective is it told from? Is it Vader or Emperor or both? Or
neither? It's
neither. Okay.
It's actually Cham Sudala, who is Hera's father.
Right, yeah, who shows up in Rebels.
He's actually the protagonist of the story, and some people, I think most people get it, and I think it's like 80% of the people who have read it kind of understand. But I think the biggest critique that I've heard anyway from that book were people being disappointed that because it's called Lords of the Sith, it's not about Vader and Palpatine. It really is about Cham Sudala overall, and how he is like the father of the rebellion. Speaking
of him though, and the rebellion, you've obviously been caught up on Rebels season 2. Yeah. How did that season stack up for you in terms of the first one? Did it give you kind of the reveals and revelations and battles and all that kind of thing that you wanted? How did that play out for you?
It did, but it took the last 2 episodes to really get me to say, okay, that was as satisfying as I needed it to be, because
I can't argue with that. Yeah,
it seemed like there were a lot. See, because the first season, there certainly were a few episodes that felt like filler, but even when you went back and watched some later episodes, they all made sense, and they were all like, they all tied into the story. This one, whether it be with space whales or whatever it might be, there were some that didn't necessarily tie in, even though Dave Filoni says that they will. And I tend to take him for his word because he's never kind of led us astray so far. But it was those 2 episodes at the end of what happened with Maul, and then we can spoil stuff here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been months.
It's been
and they're
months.
available online. I'm sure they're on the Disney website or whatever.
Yeah, and just the fight with Ahsoka and Vader, and then the end with the music and the wheezing that we got in Return of the Jedi. With the wheezing. I mean, there were a lot of emotional moments, and we still don't know, is Ahsoka dead? Is she alive? We see her walking out. What is that exactly? Where does it go from here? Kanan's blind. I mean, shit's going down.
And I love that you see the cracked Vader mask, and you can see and hear the original Anakin kind of through it, but he's just gone, like he's just not there.
Yeah, he's just he's completely gone to the dark side, and we've seen that. And there's no remorse, there's nothing. It's like going back from what the 5 years after Revenge of the Sith, where he's battling in his head. He's not battling in his head anymore. It's about pure domination. It's about the dark side, serving his emperor. It's all that stuff, and this is something that helps him further down the dark side, that he can indeed fight his former Padawan, and she even knows it too. Like that slash across the face was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I found as well, there was, to me, it felt like a lot of filler also. There's a lot of episodes where it kind of ends with they're in a hangar and then the stormtroopers run in and then they have a shootout and then somebody jumps into the ship as it flies off.
Yeah,
like there's a lot of that, you know what I mean?
I think that was also a danger about going to 22 or 23 episodes, whatever they went to, because they were it's a longer season. But they're telling the story they wanted to tell. I think it's one of those shows that I think that once the Blu-ray comes out or the whole season now is available, I think it's something that if you didn't watch it week to week and you watch it in like whether it's a couple days or a week, is maybe a better serve.
It's like with Game of Thrones, like you're like, oh, that was a slow episode. But then when you see the whole picture or you see the next week's episode, you're like, oh, that's right, because this was building to that. So, it kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
To maybe do it that way. Now, we've got that spin-off movie coming out, obviously, this year. When I say that spin-off movie, what's it called? Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I agree with John as well. I don't love that title. but
Star Wars story,
Yeah. Obviously, you're looking forward to that. But is there any other kind of spin-off movies that you would, or even TV shows that you would want to see done, like even if they're rumored ones or something you've got, from your own head?
Well, if it comes to movies, I'm definitely championing and really want to see an ObiWan trilogy. I really think that there's something. If going back to what we were talking about with the Star Wars comics, my favorite run of the Star Wars comics. Every time they go into the Obi-Wan story of what he was doing on Tatooine, watching over Luke, they've done it like 3 or 4 different issues, and I've just been on the edge of my seat reading every one, and I think that it would serve as an amazing film for what they can do, and they can bring Ewan McGregor back. That would be a movie I'd want to see. But as a television show, you mentioned Game of Thrones. I think that the Old Republic as a Netflix series would be incredible. I think it would be something that they could set up the 1,000, if they wanted to make it 1,000 years, because the Old Republic that you and I know from like Knights of the Old Republic, where it's like 3,000, 4,000 years back. You don't necessarily have to put it that far back. I think that's one of the benefits of the setting it in the new canon. You could say it was 1,500 years ago if you wanted to, and you tell these brand new stories in a Netflix series. I think that's a way to introduce fans to the Old Republic by not confusing them right away by putting it on the big screen.
That's right, and you can do anything. You can go in any direction for a story like that. Then they're not constricted by by being set in between movies or anything like that. You can take it wherever you kind of want to do it. On that Obi-Wan Kenobi movie kind of point, you mentioned something like, I think it was you, where you thought the reveal of the Star Wars Expo that's coming up, what's it called?
Celebration.
Celebration, yeah. Is that they'll roll out Ewan McGregor and they'll announce that movie? Do you still think that's something that's, if you even said that?
I said I think that they were going to announce that Ewan McGregor or that the Obi-Wan movie was going to be the next spin-off movie. And then John said he guaranteed 100% that they were going to announce the Ewan McGregor movie, and that Ewan McGregor was going to walk out on stage when they announced it. And I said how great it would be if they announced Ewan McGregor and Jon Favreau at the same time. But I think because Favreau directing it would be something that I think
would be a great combo. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's pretty deep in the Disney family anyway right now. But I think, I do think that Ewan McGregor is going to be announced, and I do think that they're going to announce an ObiWan movie. I think that we haven't had. Remember, they announced all these spin-off movies so early before, and we haven't had any new announcements. When Josh Trank was supposed to do the Boba Fett movie, that slate hasn't been filled yet. They haven't talked about any of this stuff.
If I had to choose between a Boba Fett movie and an ObiWan movie, I'm definitely leaning towards the ObiWan. Yeah, like you mentioned on the comics, every time one of those issues would come up, that's when I'd realize, no, this is the story that I really want to see most, or even read about most. You know what I mean? It's just such a fascinating time. This like broken Jedi just living in the desert, just hating himself. You know what I mean? Just having to wait, just having to sit around for this kid to grow up that may or may not save the galaxy. Like,
Yeah, and he can't make a phone call. He can't do anything. He's got to sit there in the desert. It's like you figure they could have picked a better location. But
yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot to it, and who better than Ewan McGregor to do that and give him a chance a little bit more to shine as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I think that it's something, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a trilogy. If they said it was one movie, I'd be just as happy if they said it was a trilogy. But I don't know. It's just something I think it could happen, and I think going back to the Netflix series, with Old Republic, the other thing is just think how cool it would be, because they even mentioned this in some of the other novels that it has happened. There were armies of Sith, there were armies of Jedi. Let's see that. Let's see those armies. Let's see what happened before the Sith. Before Bane created the rule of two, let's see those two armies. Let's see them go at one another. Let's see what it was like when the Sith Empire was vying for power. Like, that's something that Star Wars fans would jump on just to learn more about.
Absolutely. I mean, you only got to look at those like video game cinematics that they kind of bring out. The recent one with the two twins.
Yeah,
that's Old Republic, right?
That's Old Republic, and it was like they were, and that stuff still. This is what I'm talking about with being a little too confusing, because that Old Republic stuff, that's not canon stuff. Like that's like they did that because it's a popular game. There were some new add-ons that they've been working on, that BioWare have been working on also. So they just kind of added this stuff in, but that stuff isn't canon yet. And the Old Republic stuff, I think if they went and they said, this stuff is canon, is it going to hurt the new stories that much if they made all their Old Republic stuff?
I don't think so. There's some kind of, it's a lot of vague and stuff and like generalities kind of going on, but it's nothing specific. Like, it's just kind of names mentioned here and there, and the dates are a bit fuzzy, but other than that, not really. Yeah.
Right.
Speaking of video games, though, things have been pretty quiet on that front up until recently, where they had that trailer that promised video games in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Which is all very exciting, but to me, the video games so far have been pretty mediocre. Like, I gave Battlefront a go, and it's fine, but it's not something that kind of really kept my interest. Is there anything you're looking forward to, or anything that you've enjoyed or not enjoyed so much?
Well, that really hasn't been a lot in the new canon yet, but I think you were disappointed the same way that I was, is that you and I are story guys. We want more of what's going to further the story and the lore that we love so much. And I think that what Battlefront did well for a lot of people is that it puts you in the world. You felt like you're in the world. You could sit there and just stare at the environment because it's so beautiful. But as an overall story experience, it left people wanting more.
Yeah.
And I think that there hasn't been that's really the only big game that has kind of come out. I mean, they had the other one. There was Uprising, which was also was an online game that was a little bit disappointing. It's kind of post Jedi stuff. But the one that I'm looking forward to, whatever this brand new game is that they didn't even, I don't even know what the hell it is, but there was a rumored one that it was a Han Solo game, which would kind of make sense because it would tie into the Han Solo standalone movie. But but it's the same people, I believe, who made Uncharted, I think.
Yeah, Amy Henning,
right,
at Visceral, yeah.
Yeah. So whatever she's working on, that's the one I'm excited for.
You're going to get something story based from there, aren't you?
Absolutely. I mean, the Uncharted stories are incredible. So I want to see what they do, how they tell the stories with Star Wars too. That's the one. And I think I agree with you. We're probably not going to get into these things 2-3 years. And we're like, okay, well, we'll be kind of just, it's like bated breath waiting for these things. But I think that they're going to come in kind of fast and furious when they do. They're going to start coming in a lot more because it takes so much time to do it.
That's right. It's 4 or 5 years, to get these things kind of
Yeah.
off the ground. And I think that was also the problem with Battlefront. Like, they wanted to add a story mode, but they had to get it out for The Force Awakens. So it ended up being this multiplayer game, which is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But
Right.
it really felt like it was missing that element, especially considering the last 2 games had fantastic story modes that kind of weaved in and out of the maps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's. I just want to see how they're going to design all of these things, like the new ones. I know they're even doing the new Battlefront next year. I think is coming out, right? And then
Yeah.
so are they gonna what are they gonna do to make it different? Because that they listen. They know the frustrations that I think a lot of fans have. So I'm curious how they're gonna change it up next the next release.
I mean, I even saw John Boyega on Twitter ask them. He's like, "I really enjoyed it, but story mode would have been pretty good."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think they'll definitely listen to that, and it's easier as well now from the perspective they've got the engine, they've got a lot of the maps. They can now just build off that. They're not going from scratch for the next one.
Right.
So hopefully we'll see something a little bit different. Kind of last question. Is there anything from Legends that you would like to see crossover, whether it be a character, a whole story, anything at all that you would love to see kind of filter through? Because we get little bits and pieces every now and then. But is there anything else that you'd like to see show up?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few, and I think that the first thing I'd like to see is, I mean, I know that they made him canon in the Clone Wars series, but I'd like to see Drew Karpyshyn's version or vision of Darth Bane kind of come to be, because the way that if you guys out there listening have never read the Darth Bane trilogy by Drew Karpyshyn, yes, it's Legends, but it is one of the best stories you possibly can read in the Star Wars universe. And I'd like to see more elements of that, of how that came to be. Darth Revan had been rumored to be canon for a long time. I'd like to see them make him canon. I am pretty much, I used to think that Snoke was going to wind up being Plagueis. I've moved away from that theory.
Really? You're off that completely?
Yeah, I've moved away from that theory, but I do think that Plagueis and that story that James Luceno set up, if that book was like a mob story in the Star Wars universe, and I would like to know, I always wanted to know how Plagueis and Palpatine came to be. So I'd like to see them either introduce more elements of Luceno's version of that, because even in Luceno's canon novel Tarkin, he mentions some of the things that he introduced in the Plagueis novel. So I'd like to see that happen and become canon again. More of the Plagueis introduction that Luceno set up.
Just quickly getting back to the ObiWan thing, there's a story in the Star Wars Visionary comic where Darth Maul turns up on Tatooine looking for Obi-Wan. I don't know if you read it. It's from...
I've heard about it. I never read it. Yeah.
It's very short, but it's fantastic. And I would love to see just that on the big screen. I'm not sure how that would actually work in terms of... Because Darth Maul's alive 5 years before, or 4 years before A New Hope.
Right.
So I don't know whether you could actually kind of do it. Because then if you did that in the movie, then Obi-Wan would be, he'd be more Alec Guinness than he would be Ewan McGregor. But I also loved Shadows of the Empire. That was one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
So anything from there will be fantastic. Prince Shizor. Obviously, we can't get the Timothy Zahn trilogy, but Thrawn, obviously.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that too, because in Life Debt, there's a pirate that reminded me of Prince Shizor, and there's also and I think that this new advisor that is kind of mentoring Sloane was absolutely, there's an homage there to Thrawn. It's not Thrawn. I know some people were wondering if it was, but it isn't Thrawn. And I'm wondering how much influence the Zahn novels had on Chuck Wendig, because I didn't feel any of it in Aftermath, but I certainly felt it in Life Debt.
Well, I'm sure he got a lot of, this is nothing like, the Timothy Zahn books.
Yeah.
And he thought, shit, well, okay, I'll do a bit of that then.
I think that's probably right. I think you're exactly right.
And I think, I might be wrong, but it seems like Ben Mendelsohn's character in Rogue One, he seems a bit Thrawn-ish. There seems to be, little elements of that kind of translate. So, it's even if we don't get Thrawn, it's good to see kind of that kind of filter through.
Don't be convinced that we're not getting Thrawn, whether it be in Rebels or...
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me if he turned up. Didn't they promise the reveal of a big character in season 3, like a big
That's what they
character?
said. I don't necessarily think it's going to be Thrawn, but I wouldn't be surprised. I think we're going to get it might be Mara Jade, or it might even be the reintroduction of Cad Bane.
Right. Okay. Cool. Great. Either of those would be fantastic. All right, I think that's about it. What do we go for? Yeah, a bit over 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Feels pretty good. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Schmoes Know. I know that I think the link will be in the description here. Go check that out and subscribe to my channel over there. And then every Thursday on Collider Jedi Council.
Definitely worth checking out. Two fantastic podcasts, and also you got the Schmodown as well. Obviously, that's heating up.
Yeah, the movie trivia Schmodown. We have it's a weekly movie trivia battle, which is pretty much like the WWE/UFC of movie trivia. And we have a lot of cool battles happening every Friday on Collider.
Absolutely. And if people are interested in Jedi Council, I think it'll be this week. I'm going to have a little bit of a guest appearance in that at some point. If I get the video finished on time, which I should. I'll be all over it.
If it's not this week, it'll be next week. But definitely, we do a segment called it's called Address the Council, and I actually have to thank my brother for this. I don't know if did I tell you this?
You did, yeah. That he put the word out, so no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, my brother came up with the idea, and he said, "Hey, I know that Mr. Sunday Movies is in Australia, but like, what if you guys had him kind of do what he does anyway, but sending it for like Address the Council?" I said, that's a great idea. So, and then I reached out to you, and here we are.
Fantastic. All right. And people can find me at Mr. Sunday Movies on YouTube, obviously, Twitter, Facebook, all of those things, and possibly Jedi Council this week, but maybe next week. Who knows? It's all up in the air. All right. Thanks again, Kristian. This has been great. We'll reconvene maybe in a few months or whenever.
Yeah, we'll do it again for sure.
Absolutely. All right, thanks, mate. Have a good one.
You too, dude.